Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast presented by Callaway Golf. Our platform brings you, the Hoops fan, deep inside the playing careers and personal lives of past players and coaches in Australian basketball. From World Championships to Olympics to the adversity of careers cut short, we explore it all direct with the players themselves. I'm John Casey. Here's your host, Andrew O'Brien.
G'day Hoops fans, if you've ever wondered about what happens off the court with the players, then this episode is for you. Today's guest is a former Australian Boomer, Adelaide 36er and South Dragons player who is now CEO of the Australian Basketball Players Association. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jacob Holmes.
Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Sorry, I had a little tab come up and I just had to click it off. So how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good, yeah. Lovely weather in Adelaide, so can't complain.
That's fantastic. Usually we're a day behind, so whatever you've got, we get tomorrow. So
it's beautiful at the moment. It's beautiful.
Good. Perfect. Thanks for jumping on the podcast. This episode I'm really looking forward to in particular because I think it's going to be a real education type session for a lot of the fans out there in terms of what you're currently doing as CEO of the Australian Basketball Players Association, because it's something that probably a lot of stuff we don't really need to know, but I think it's important that we can at least appreciate what goes on behind the scenes, and what sort of culminates in what we see now with a very attractive league for players to be in. But obviously that doesn't happen overnight. But I guess I know it's sort of it's been a little bit of a juggling act trying to get you on because you're so busy. Can you sort of fill us in with what a typical week these days looks for you running that organisation?
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you've done it. I've been loving the chats you've been having, and obviously it was money well spent talking to Russell Hinder before his podcast because gee whiz, he was saying some nice things. So that was money well spent. So thanks, Rusty, but as well as Lucas Walker and that. But so I've got a regular week for us is a lot of player engagement. Obviously we've got a heavy focus on that. So it'd be phone calls to players, our delegates, as well as conversations with the leagues, whether it be the NBL, WNBL, or the national teams with Boomers and Opals, and going through whatever's happening. So at the moment, obviously it's heading into the season. So connection with our delegates coming out of the Blitz last week for the NBL, rounding out a few items before we start the season and confirming those last minute things for the season to kick off in terms of policies or other things. So that's a pretty regular week. And then now, which is a great thing to say after a period of time when it was just me running it, there's a good amount of staff. So working with them on what they're doing and how they're working with the players and establishing those programs, which obviously is a big topic for us, discuss around off the court and what players are doing and making sure we're trying to meet those needs and kind of continually evolve that program. So that's kind of in a nutshell, but it is a good gig. I mean, I played basketball for a while and did a law degree, so it's a nice mix of those things where it's connected to student basketball, but it's I can use the skills that I tried to establish off the court in terms of a law degree and that's been sort of a great way to bring those two things together.
Yeah, and that's what will sort of tie up. I'm just looking down here, and I'll read it out for to give some perspective and some numbers to the listeners. Over the last 6 years, the minimum wage has gone up 88%, and the salary cap up 82%. So those numbers are obviously huge. You're not going to probably get even half that in most industries. That's pretty much through the roof. Two mandatory development players, their increased wages every year. And obviously, as we focus a lot on this podcast, is players' well-being. So more services are funded. There's more support there for players. And everything's just really been advanced in that regard, which makes sense that you would need a lot more support around you now because it's sort of, from the outside anyway, becoming bigger than Ben Hur sort of thing. And that's when obviously you need support in there. But look, we're going to sort of go full circle and bring it back into this because there's a lot of components to this that I guess play a factor in developing something like this. For instance, if the listeners are sort of not sure where the ABPA came from, we're going to get to that because it wasn't always men's and women's together and things like that. But what we will do is not neglect your playing career, because you did play 407 games. So it wasn't just a flash in the pan, and you played for our great country. We know you're obviously in Adelaide now, and you played a lot for Adelaide. But growing up, which club did you play for, and how young were you when you actually started playing?
Yeah, right. No, 407 games with people forgetting I was there, I think. So I kept getting contracts. But I started with actually a club called the German Arms, which is up in Adelaide Hills here, my first club. And then moved down to play for the Sturt Sabres, the Mighty Sturt Sabres. So I now coach the under 10 girls with my second daughter, and been doing that for years with my first as well. So back at the club with great people I played through with, which came through with, like Laura Hodges is back there with her daughter, and that type of thing. Matt Illman and players I play with have got their Darren Ings back there, and so it's really cool to be back with our kids playing at the club. So it came with Sturt. I think I started there about under 12s. As a quite a rounded player, both physically, most predominantly, I think. And so I started there with Sturt Sabres. Loved it. Played under 14 club champs, which I think are just on at the moment. I think the Sturt girls team is there, so that's really cool. And then came all the way through, and then went to shoot the AIS when I was 15, I think it was.
Was it just basketball you were playing growing up?
What's that? Sorry.
Was it just basketball you were playing, or were you playing footy or soccer?
I played a lot of sport, actually. I'm fortunate enough with a single mum who's a superstar. My two older sisters, both of which played sport for Australia and South Australia. My actually middle sister played the AIS for volleyball and played the Australian team. So all on a single mum teacher, like unbelievable, absolutely my hero, superstar. Don't know how she did it. So I was lucky to play every sport in the sun. I was horrible with a bat and ball. Cricket was a disaster, which, much to the dismay of my grandpa, who was the chairman of the local cricket club, and built the cricket oval. But football a lot, and then a lot of volleyball coming through high school. I went to Heathfield High School, which is a very big volleyball school, and we won a number of national championships as a school, and I was part of that. As was my sisters, and as is my now wife. So we were high school sweethearts back in the volleyball days. So I came and played everything, and then basketball was a sport. About 15, and I'm fortunate enough to make, I think it was a state team for volleyball, or maybe it was a national kind of training camp for volleyball, which is in Canberra, which I was like, that's great, awesome, can't wait. And then there was a state footy thing that I think was going to Ballarat or Bendigo. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of good. And then Bass was like, yeah, we've got a tour going to Spain. And I was like, deuces, I'm going to Spain. So that was pretty much it. I went off to Spain. I think it was with Dean Kingsman, and played with the Sassy tour over there, and it was unbelievable. And that never looked back. I was like, that's it. Like, this is, and that's kind of what I love about basketball. It's international. It's not this, no offense to the domestic sports, great, but I just love the idea of being able to travel the world and play a sport. So off to Spain we went. Yeah,
and then you mentioned you ended up at the Institute. I think that was what did I got here, 2000, 2001. Was that like a lot of the other guys recruited from a national championship? Sort of talent ID sort of thing, and who was the coach at that time?
Yeah, it was. I was playing for SA Country, so I was a country lad, which was great. Gave me the chance to have every shot possible. So I think I was shooting about 40 shots a game and getting 30 points. So it wasn't a great ratio, but got picked up to play to go to the shoot. I think it was 99, 2000, something like that. So picked up that, went there. Frank Arcega was the head coach. Marty Clark was the assistant coach, and Paul Goris was our scholarship coach. So now, obviously, they've all progressed through their careers. Obviously, Marty and Paul Goris and that. But yeah, like it was an interesting basketball way to get there. I was lucky enough to be associated with the 36ers a bit at the time, because for year 10 work experience, I'll tell you a story. I kind of didn't want to. Everyone was, I'd be a vet, or I'd go to school, or whatever, be a council worker or whatever. And I was like, well, I want to, hang around. So I was like, my coach at the time for Sturt was Dave Smythe, and his brother was Phil Smythe. And so I was like, hey, like, can you hit up Phil and see if I can come down and like just do drink bottles and go up to them, do marketing or whatever, like just spend a week around the Sixers. And at that point in time, they were like peak championships, or like Mark Davis, Darnell Mead, Kevin Brooks, Brett Maher, like, let's go here. So I fortunate enough, I got, like, that Phil said, yeah, you can come down. So I was like, great, rock up there. And Phil looks at me, and they were sponsored by Converse at the time, and gives me the Converse bag and goes, you ready to train? I'm like, No, I'm the work experience guy. I'm here to I'm 15. Like I'm here to. He's like, no, like I know you're going to shoot next year. I know you can play. Like you're in that Australian squad. So let's see if you can come and train. So I trained with the 36ers for my week of work experience. Talk about one of the all-time greatest things that ever happened. Also got my butt kicked the whole week by Mark Davis, completely beasting me, and whatever, like cool. So it was pretty amazing. So I had a connection with the Sixers all the way through AIS. So I was super supportive of me through that process, especially Phil when I got injured, which we could touch on. But he was amazing through that when I broke my foot and came back and joined the Sixers. I think at 17 or 18.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and it's an interesting story because I think it's a lesson for people in life in general. We've heard a few stories. Matt Shanahan was similar in terms of just the doors seemed just luckily opened when he was 15, 16 at the Magic, just to train and things like that. So I think it's a lesson to everyone. If you just put yourself out there, sometimes things just occur. So no, that's a great story. And obviously, well, did that have any bearing on you coming back to Adelaide, or it was just because that's where home was?
Absolutely. I think I signed with Adelaide when I was at the Tube. Like, so I actually signed a letter of intent or whatever you want to call it to come back and play for Adelaide when I was going to leave the Tube. So they used to rock in and play the Canberra Cannons at the time, and they'd rock in and Phil give me a bag full of gear. Like I was the coolest kid on campus. I'd roll in with like this massive Converse bag full of free stuff and would roll that around. And like some of the gear, I think I still had some of the gear. Like they had this amazing, massive jacket. And for winter, cold winter in AIS, I wore that all the time. And like that was probably my downfall a little bit. I thought mine proverbial didn't stink for a little while there. So maybe got a little bit too big for my boots and got crashed back down to earth when I snapped my foot in half. So that was probably a lesson. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be hard not to get a bit of an inflated ego when you're getting that stuff thrown.
Mate, the size of, I had a stereo that like was the size of a 100-inch TV screen. It was the stupidest stereo. My mum was like, really? She put my money away. I was allowed to have, I think, $1,000 or $2,000. And she goes, you can have that. Spend it whatever you want. And she thought I'd buy like a kebab at Alibaba on the Tuesday. No, I bought a stereo the size of my room. I couldn't even fit it in, basically. So I had my bed in the cell block, which was my bed, the fridge, the cupboard, and a stereo. And like I couldn't turn it up because I would have killed myself. So anyway, like that's what you do when you're 17. But anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. I was going to ask you, you did mention traveling was something that appealed to you. If college at that point was a thought, but obviously if you've got opportunities to join, like you said, an incredibly successful era with the Adelaide 36ers, did you entertain any offers, though, about going to the US at the time?
Yeah, I did a lot, especially, I think it was Gonzaga. There's a couple of others. I was keen on going to a school like Stanford or something because I like school, which is a little bit different for most basketball players, I guess, at the time. No offense to the guys I was there with. So I was keen to that. But then I think my injury did have a big play on that, in that I was just, I didn't want to go away again. I was like, I want to be back home. Adelaide's an amazing team. They're my home team. Like, why am I going away for 4 years to come back and get to where I want to be, right, which I'm available right now? Like I was available to be in the roster, playing minutes, and a team that was successful with a coach that really believed it and believed in me. So I thought, like, why am I going away 4 years and then to come back to that? I thought, why not start here and just go train? And that was a bit more common back then. Yeah, so we went away from that for most of my I was the last of that group, and you had Newley and stuff coming in and Joe, but per se guys. But before me, there's always the Brad Sheridans and that who'd come in, and everyone just went straight into the league. Because I think we had 13 teams at the time, so there were like heap of opportunities for players to come in, and it would have been 12.
So it does, I guess, beg the question because like you said, a lot of them, like what would be the point of going away to college to try and make the NBL when the reality is you've got an NBL opportunity already there? But it does, I guess, beg the question: how do the colleges then sell it to you? Do they say, if you come here, forget the NBL, you could be going NBA? Is that how they try and sell it to you?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think they saw me jump over a toothpick and realize he's probably not going to make the NBA. But I don't know if that was ever on the cards, but who knows? But I think that they sold me by pamphlets, to be honest. Like the amount of like stuff they sent around the mail was absurd. Like right. My mum was like, "This is like booklets and booklets on like how good the school will be and had them piled up next to my bed, like the classic story of like, and that was in the day because you didn't email about it. It was just like they posted you physical handbooks. And Gonzaga, I remember being like over the top. I was like, how many times can I read this? So they were selling you more on the idea that you could study, you'd be in this whole elite system and everything. But they were competing with, honestly, the 36ers in 2000 when I got there, I think 2001, were as elite as nearly as elite as now. We had food after games, we had food after training, we had a full-time manager who would strap our ankles before trainings. We had our uniforms left at the training venue. Our training venue was our game venue at the Powerhouse, as it was called then. We had weights nearby. We had setup. We had connections. It was pro. And so you weren't walking like I'd walk into, with just your like NBA player with a change of socks and jocks, and everything was left in change rooms. Everything was clean for you, and it was different, it's actually funny when I went back the second time after being in South Dragons, I was like, man, this is not as good as it was 8 years ago. It was like it hadn't gone anywhere, hence why the Player Association probably came up. But yeah, it was hard to compete with what Adelaide were doing. They were successful. In the first year I played in NBL, we won it. So
yeah,
it was funny enough, it was the last time Adelaide 36ers won it. So
well, that was her third in like a 4-year stint.
Yeah, 35 years or something. Yeah, and it was like that team was like not meant to win. It's quite funny when Rusty was talking about like we were like, Willie Farley and Brett Maher, and then like Paul Rees, David Stiff, Rupert Satwell, Mark Nash, Jason Williams, Matt Garrison, going up against like that West Sydney team was like stacked. And we came out and gave them 74 in the first half. And I remember going to change rooms, and Marzi tells the story really well. He's like walked in change rooms and everyone just started laughing. Like game 3 of the finals, like I'm laughing, I'm like, this is ridiculous. We can't lose a issue like this. So like it was a crazy, crazy time.
Yeah, well, some of your trainings probably were harder than some of the games.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was it was amazing.
Those 5-on-5s going. So I guess with how I want to tie all this in is obviously you go to Adelaide and you're a caliber of player that I'll sort of make a presumption you probably don't need to work. In terms of like Rusty talks about only being on 15 grand, for one season and stuff like that. You probably weren't in that position, but you enjoyed school. Did you then go to uni whilst you were playing?
Yeah, that was sort of a non-negotiable for me and my family. It doesn't really roll where you get to just, So I came into Adelaide and 2 pieces of advice I got were 1, you've got to study, and 2, you need to buy a house so you don't have any money to spend. So I bought a house right near the airport. We used to call Terminal 3. It was that close to the airport. You could actually park. People used to park out of my house and walk to the airport, and that's no joke. We had a line of Sixers cars out the front of my house for road trips because you could just walk from my house to the airport. So not like the best spot, but bought a house and I had no money because it was all paying off the mortgage at 18, 19, and did uni. So I started doing uni. I did a finance and marketing degree. Absolutely hated it. It was the worst thing I ever did, and kind of just ground my way through uni. I had in my contracts actually that I get some of my uni paid for. I think they put that in a lot of players' contracts back then in Adelaide, but no one else used it. And I was telling them about every year. They're like, man, what's this guy? Why is he using this education thing we've got?
Sorry, just to go back a little bit. When you say the advice was to get a house and go to uni, was that from your mum?
Yeah, my mum, my auntie.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I have to. Yeah,
because you mentioned that she was a teacher, right?
Yeah, mum was a school teacher. So she was big on that, and dad was a school teacher as well, and so was surrounded by it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, and it's so going on from that finance marketing degree, what made you think of going back and doing law if you didn't have a great experience?
Because my aunties are got very close to my family. My aunties are very close with uncles and that. And so I was having a conversation with her. She's like, what are you doing with your degree? I said, I'm fluffing about doing this thing over here. And she goes, okay, cool. Like, basically, she goes, what do you want to do? I said, I'd love to do a law degree, but I can't do a law degree and play basketball. Like, that doesn't work. Like, it's not, it's too much time and too hard. And she looked at me like basically, and I won't swear, she's like, you absolute whip. Like, so you're telling me you can't do it, like it's so hard, you're so busy, and kind of gave it to me, took a piss out of me. I was like, all right, like easy up. So I enrolled, and the great thing was at the time, like you do have a lot of time when you're playing. It's hard and you're physically stuffed, and it wasn't like, I'm not saying it's easy, but I did have time, and I was motivated, and that's the biggest thing. I was really motivated. I wanted to do it, and that's what players that we always try and find is like a way to. You want to do something you want to do. You can't be forced to do a marketing and comms degree but I wanted to do a law degree. I found it interesting. I wanted to read the textbooks. I wanted to be on planes and find out what happened in that high court case, which might sound nerdy, but I enjoyed it. So I jumped in, and I was 100% committed to it after that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And even I remember I didn't do a law degree, but legal studies was one of your favorite classes because you get the juicy cases, and they reel you in. Were these at like the University of South Australia or something like that?
Yeah, so I started at UniSA here, which were really supportive. Had a fantastic lecturer, actually, Tracy Coleman, who I would call out. She was amazing, really supported me, kind of got that I was playing. So, work around my schedule with certain things and understand I'd be on road trips. And she was great and really felt like I was supported to do it here at UniSA. Obviously, when I moved to Townsville, I transferred to JCU because couldn't then really do a law degree online. You had to be in there. You could do bits of it, but you had to be in there for sort of like, mock.
James Cook.
Yeah, James Cook. Yeah. Up in Townsville. And then I came back and finished off here at Adelaide, and then did Adelaide Uni, did my what basically have to do like an end of degree part to actually get admitted to the bar. So did that at Adelaide Uni, and it took me forever though. Like it took me 10 years or something. Like it was.
Yeah, well, I guess
12 years. Took me forever.
Yeah, anyone that knows anyone that's done a law degree, you probably can't do it full time. We're also a full time basketball player in terms of the hours involved in those sort of things. We'll keep on the basketball pathway as well. Obviously, you're a big recruit down where I'm from in terms of Melbourne with the South Dragons, and the startup and Mark Cowan running the club there. And we've had a couple of former players on from there already, and we've got Cortez Groves in the one-on-one comp today on the Instagram page up against Darnell Mee. But I guess that South Dragons side of things, you mentioned the Adelaide 36ers and how professional and things like that it was, and perhaps you didn't have that at South Dragons, but I think the benefit may come some 10 years later where you're putting this ABPA together and you can see what's required, what's missing, what you liked. And I'll sort of pre-frame this question by bringing up something with Paul Roos, the AFL coach. He said when he was playing, because he had considered coaching maybe his career, he hand wrote down 101 things he felt when he was playing, so that when he was 50, 60, 70, whatever coaching, he could pull that list out and never forget what it was like to be a player. And I guess along this journey, were you sort of, before obviously you put these things together, were you not necessarily handwriting a list, but were you thinking about, gee, I wish we had this, why can't we do this? Were those tables starting to turn?
They were. I think, especially in Adelaide, when you start out, right, you start in this like environment, you go, this is normal. And then you start working through and you go to South Dragons, and that was great too. Mark Cowan and Ruffy, what they did with that club was exceptional. Just when I went back to Adelaide, it was like, this is not as good as it was before. So those first, 6, 7 years of my career, I was like, this is the standard. But you just start to see it dip, and then it really dipped. And you're like, hang on, like what's happened here? And as you get older, you're more, your eyes open, your head pops up, and you stop thinking about yourself. And I know, David Stiff talks really well around that, you're developmentally ready to actually think about someone besides yourself. And then when you're starting professional, like elite basketball, you need to focus on that 100% when you're 19, 20. But as I started to get like 23, 24, I was like, I don't quite understand where we're going here. And I got frustrated with what I saw as, even injustices with other players. I got really animated about those, even before starting Player Association, about my own, like those things. I was pretty adamant on that. And I also looked at the contract for, I started doing lottery and going like, man, when you actually start reading your contract, which, like I wasn't doing, but this is what it is.
Most probably didn't, yeah.
It's in the last page type thing. And you read and go like, man, this is not very good. And then you read the collective bargaining agreement, which nearly no one, like no one was reading back then. I was like, this is also not very good. And then you start asking questions, and it just became a point where I started to feel like there were things that the players could do, the players collectively could stand for, and that they should have a voice on it, even just a starting point. And so that was where it started from. And I as a player, you are very consumed with your own career and what's going on. So yeah, when things happened to me, I naturally went like, well, who else has this happened to? When the point system had an impact on me signing someone, I was like, who else is getting impacted by this? And when when you got sacked and no one knew how to do anything, or you relocated and no one paid your relocation costs. Oh, who else? And those stuff, you just looked at those things and you went like, what happened? What happens here, and who looks after these things? And at that point in time, you realised that there wasn't much in place. It had been strong, and then it kind of dipped away as the league dipped away, kind of in sort of sync. And it was at a point where you're like, okay, I'm not sure what's actually going on here, and maybe we need to look into it. Especially doing a law degree, you start reading things, going like, oh right, this is this could be better.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point because it's probably from what it sounds like, it's one of those things. If you don't know, you don't know. Like if you don't know what to look for, and all of a sudden you were educated and knowing what to look for. And I think you put it perfectly when you said when you went to Adelaide the first time, like you would just assume that's the norm. Mm-hmm. And so if on the flip side, if a player's treated perhaps poorly, maybe they just go, well, that's how things are done in this league, and that's how it is. And I've got no one to go to a higher or a supportive authority to advocate for me. So it just is what it is. So I guess that's it sort of does beg the question again. What was there any play association at all when you were playing?
Yeah, there was. I remember when I started, it was quite strong. Rupert Sapper, who was in my team at Sixers, was really heavily involved, and it was a stronger piece. I had no real idea. I just signed up because that's what you did. I'm on board. Like, let's go. I'm 20, and all the senior guys are there, and jump on board. And I was interested in what they were doing, but not invested in it. And then when the league started to hit some troubled times, the Player Association really wasn't there or strong enough to stand up in those moments. And that was when I really started to delve into my law degree. And to be honest, it was also delving into my law degree because I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to be playing. Who knows if this league survives? Like we went through, the calls of like, hey, I remember in Europe, hey, like the club's fallen over, like you don't have a contract. See you when you get back. We're talking about whether the league goes forward anymore. Like they were happening. And so, I just saw that as a requirement that you need the players to have a voice in those discussions around where this league's going, how it's going to reframe, or what's happened to this club, what happens to those players that had contracts and now don't have anything. They were just left, and I was one of those players that got left, and it was a horrible time. And yeah, but it happened, and so then you had to do, what are you going to do about it? And that's one of the core motivations was hearing those amount of stories from like mates like Rusty, who just had the team fall over, and it's like, sorry, you don't have a contract anymore. How do I pay my insurance? Rusty starts pouring beers, and I'm going back and living and doing my law degree and having to selling things to try and cover like the fact we couldn't afford to pay mortgages and stuff, and you start like going, this is borrowing cars because you're handing your cars back in, and just like everything was just like, so it's really stressful time for players, for my now wife, and for all your mates. So at that point I was like, I'm a big believer in you either do something about it. If you're going to complain about it, you better do something about it. Otherwise you kind of like, don't worry about it. Like, if you're going to complain and then just walk away, it's like, oh well, and then like hope someone solves it for you, that's great. But if you're going to have a whinge and say this should be better, then you better come with a solution. You better do something about it. And I was really adamant on that, and really lucky that a lot of all the players jumped in behind that over time, and now believe that they have a voice and that they are supportive and they're doing something about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's appreciate you sharing that, because I guess a lot of the fans, including myself, you probably don't think of that at the time about what the actual player's going through. You just like, this league's kind of stinking right now, and did get pretty low there for those that are sort of under 18 listening to this. That it was a long way off where we are now in terms of everything. Like like you could see the league dying in terms of how small the stadiums had to get. The quality, just the quality of everything was sort of going out. The desperation, I guess. I'm not sure how it felt for you guys, but when you look at like the like clubs coming and going, it was almost like oh, let's pop up a team back up in there and see if we can generate something in there. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, maybe we'll shut that down and we'll go. Like, it was just it seemed like we were just sort of jumping at shadows and trying to get band-aid solutions. But now we've got like a really good foundation. And I think sharing these stories like you're sharing right now are important for the players of now to understand, because it's probably a far cry from when you mentioned not just the amount of pay they're getting, but the stress it puts on your whole family, you know, and your wife and your kids and all that sort of thing. I think can sort of be taken for granted, because nowadays it's yeah, I mean, probably I don't know, you would know, and we don't need to sort of bring up figures, but development players are potentially getting more than some of your starting 5 players from sort of 12, 14 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there would be. I mean, I think if you look at so I think there's a positive side to the story. Like, in those hard times, you really work out, like, what are you about as a, well, I think as a person. Individually, we worked out what I was about and what my our family stood for, and the players worked out what they stood for, and the league also worked out where it needed to go. And I think out of that has come extremely good success, the past, especially 6-7 years. I think you look at that and look at personally what we did, what we did around that, and how motivated I was to get my degree done, how motivated I was to be organised off the court, because this may fall over at any time. It really brought home to that idea. I kind of had it when I was at IS and did my injury and lost my dream and got it back, and then it's like this happened, and you lose, the 36ers fall over, and then and you're like, you don't have a contract. It's like, oh man, like, I can't rely on this forever. It is going to end now, or in 10 years' time when I get eventually retire, but it will end. So it really brought that home to me very. So personally, I made changes, and then also the players made changes. The players kind of went, "Hang on, what are we sitting on the sidelines for? We need to get involved here." And that's sort of when I started to come in on that, 2010s. After that, like, okay, well, hang on, I'm a veteran-ish player now. I've been around in 10 years in the league or so. Like, I've kind of got some skill set and done my law degree, was doing it, and really passionate about player rights. And all right, let's kind of get this thing going. And the league also started to look at itself in the league. And obviously then Larry comes in 2016, and off we go. So I think out of that difficult time has come this time where everyone appreciates where we are. Everyone understands, but also is very motivated to ensure we don't rest on our laurels and get really complacent, like, oh, well, we've made it. Like, we haven't. We want to keep getting better. Our sport should be the biggest sport in Australia. We've got this huge opportunity. Like, let's go here. So that's what I think is great about it, is that it's bred a group of people involved in the game that are really passionate about this sport being the best it can be. And it's not there yet, but it's on its pathway in the NBL. And I think WBL has got to make some strides, but we're working hard on that. And I think you look at the Boomers and Opals and national teams and participation, and all of our national teams, across all of our amazing abilities. I think that is what basketball is. That's the opportunity it has. And that's why I think as a player association, we're really passionate about that, because it can grow. But I do want to mention, like, the players now, a lot of players now have gone through a really difficult time in COVID. I mean, that was so hard, and we knew that, and that difficult, but they're coming, but that again, we're building into this year's better than ever been before. As you said, the minimum wage are up, salary caps up, the contract protections are up. You've got injury protection insurance, so players that get injured are really well supported, and don't just, that used to be, you got injured, it's like, oh, quick, get them out of here as quickly as possible. Now it's like, no, you got to look after them. You got to pay the salary and make sure you get them healthy. And we gave up nearly $500,000 worth of funding through COVID through till now around player support for off the court, to make sure they were okay, and ensuring this. And that's I never thought we'd be able to do that when we started this thing, and we built it to where it is now. I think we never thought, but that's credit to the players, credit to our chairman Greg O'Neill, to be able to get the players to feel like they absolutely we have their back. Yeah,
no, that's fantastic. And I guess it does. You mentioned there's a significant period there, sort of Larry took over in 2016, and clearly he has a growth mindset. Obviously, it's obvious, but I guess pre that, because some organisations, when there's big change or there's someone trying to advocate for someone, it can turn noses up to the point where you kind of really have to sell your vision. and your idea. Was that the case early days? Did you find some adversity in it, or was it that they were always, willing to embrace the idea of a players' association and then the joining of it?
I'm kind of half smirking here, which you won't be able to see on the podcast. But look, to be honest, right? Look, a players' association is the players' union, right? So we represent the players. We're there for their best interests. So there's going to be times when we don't agree.
Yeah.
There's lots of times when you don't agree on certain things because you see something some way and they see something another way, and you've got to try. But what we've done, we think we've done a really good job of is trying to find a solution that is what's the best interest of the players and the game. We're not going to ever go for something as a player association is going to jeopardise the game, because if the game doesn't grow, the players' salaries can't grow and the conditions can't grow, and it has to all work. But at the same time, it can't grow without respect for the people who are both the product and the employee and the greatest asset. Like the players are all those things. So you've got to respect that that's who they are and that's what they do. So we feel like that's always been, there's been some really challenging ones, obviously. Early days, it was very challenging when I was still playing. That was probably the hardest because you were fighting for contracts with potentially with teammates that were, being hard done by, and you were fighting hard with the club that you were then trying to sign with. Doesn't always go great. When you, hey, do you want to re-sign me with your personal hat on? But then at the same time, you can't do that to that player. You have to pay them their full wages. They're like, oh, if you want that, then you have to take a pay cut. You're like, oh, this is getting not great. So it may have brought forward the time to retire. But then again, I wasn't very good by the end. So that may have also brought forward the time to retire when I was no longer do anything. So
too humble. Now I do want to because on that note, when you mix sort of your playing and that sort of thing, because the reality was you were playing for Australia in the Commonwealth Games in 2006, and then in between some seasons you were obviously playing. Was it back with Sturt as well in your seniors?
Yeah, I played Eastern Mavericks to start with, which is a club that wasn't there when I started my juniors, which is up in the hills where I was from. So I played with them when I first came back because Sturt was stacked with like Oscar Foreman and Paul Bauer and Jason Williams. They had two men. So Eastern Mavericks, my club, went back in there and we actually won a championship. Then I went to Sturt and we actually got lucky and won one there as well. But I used to play the what we call NBL 1 in Adelaide now.
Yeah, and you were winning like grand final MVPs. Was the championships? Is it called the Woolacott Medal? Have I pronounced that right?
Yeah, a couple of them.
Yeah. So I guess the question there is, how did you not burn out? Because you're living and breathing basketball, but then you're playing, and then you're having to look after yourself. And or was it just that you love it so much and you're so passionate about it, doesn't feel like work? How was that? I guess.
Yeah, it was. I love playing. I love training. I also found it. I just thought it was harder to try and get fit than stay fit. To be honest, just keep playing, get better. And I was really committed to try and, make those, those big boomers teams cool. Like I made some smaller ones and the ones where the big dogs weren't playing, but I never made the World Cup Olympic team, and that sucks, man. Like I wish I could have, but it's the reality, and I'm okay with that. But I was always focused on trying to achieve that. And I think also, to be fully frank, when you don't jump more than like an inch, you don't get that sore. Like if you just run up and down, don't jump. And I tell guys this all the time: stop jumping so high. You get so much pressure on your limbs. If you just jump a little bit, then you can keep running and running. So anyway, so I'm sure that played a role. I was not athletic, so I just kept plodding along and
No, you're a great player, and it's one of those things that I guess when playing's been a large part of your life, and we talk to all the players about, when retirement comes pending, how do they feel about it? It's a big moment in their life. But for you, I guess I get the sense that because you had this vision and this passion to go on with something else, do you think that made it easier coming out of playing and into full-time work?
100%. Like I think people ask this a bit, like, like, do you miss playing? For example, and a lot of people say, I don't miss it one bit. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I didn't love it when I did it. Loved it when I did it. It was the best job I'll ever have. It was so much fun. It was great. It was fantastic. I just don't want to do it anymore. And so I don't miss it. I don't miss a moment of it. I don't wish I was out there playing now. I love watching the players play now, but I don't want to be there because I did that and I enjoyed it, and I was really passionate about what I'm doing now. Like I was excited to start this journey. I had a vision around, like, not a vision, like, don't get me wrong, like had like an idea about what there could be, and I saw what the AFL Players Association was, rugby league, and that. And then when you're sitting down with people like Bogut, who's like one of our inaugural directors, and Dave Anderson and Laura Hodges, and even Jess Foley, who was with the WNBL Players Association back then, and Sharon Milner and Carly Wilson, and who I went to AIS with, and then people like Greg O'Neill, and you start building this. Paul Marshall, the AFL Players Association, has been a huge supporter, and Brendan Schwab, who was the World Players Association executive director, who was at the time running the Australian Athletes Alliance, which is the peak body for Players Association Australia. Like building these networks of people, you start getting really excited about what a basketball players association could be in Australia. And at that point in time, it was just the NBL players, and I was representing them. But I obviously was friends with Jess Foley because AIS together, and Carly Wilson and Laura Hodges, and going like, well, hang on, they've got. And there's all this stuff going on with their league and teams falling over. I was like, well, they need help. Let's come together. So we sort of came together a bit. And then it was like, you're talking to the guys and girls playing in the Opals and Boomers. You're like, well, your Boat and Patty and Joe and Lauren and Susie and Lauren over here, and Susie Backfitch. Well, we've got to work with them because otherwise they're not getting supported. And then you come up with the idea of the Australian Basketballers Association initially, now it was Australian Basketball Players Association, going, well, let's bring it all together under one hood. Let's bring it all up. And then you build I also thought a body of a substantially powerful group of players that are all supporting each other. Because when you have the NBL players supporting WNBL supporting NBL and Opals and Boomers and all that together, you create a body that could be, I think, really strong and really represent the players' voice. And the players could have their voice expressed well. So, and it was taken out of the professional Footballers Australia, the PFA that represents soccer players here, the Matildas, Socceroos A-League, W League, like seeing that going, that's what we should be. And then having, as I've mentioned a couple of times, like Greg coming as inaugural chair, and Mark Cowan, came in as well on the board, like people that, like I think that has really shaped why I was so excited about going, like, we could do something, and the players have an opportunity here, and I'd love to work for them and work for them to have a bigger voice.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. The picture you've just painted for us all of how it came together, and we can see obviously and listen to your passion for it, and I think that's what it takes if something as big as what you and the support network around have created, you need someone with a vision like that. Same as Larry. It can't just be an advertised position where someone comes in and works 9 to 5, because the reality is you probably don't work 9 to 5, right? It's like a lifestyle thing, and you got to be willing to think outside the square and add more work to your schedule even when you think you can't, and not just do your job, but then go and learn from others, like you've done with football and and soccer and those sort of things. And I guess, like you said at the very start of the podcast, constantly have conversations with the people you're representing to find out what is happening, what they need, how they could benefit, those sort of things. And when you touched on one name there, Jess Foley, talk about brains and studying and being an athlete.
Like next level Foles, like next level, like annoyingly, like doing a degree and getting like a master's, and then going, I'm going to go be a doctor. It's like, oh, good, like leave us alone. But
yeah,
like I do want to say this, like don't. I hope it doesn't come across this way, but the Players Association isn't me. It isn't isn't one person or two, but it is like the players. Like it's really important, like that. It's them. So I'm just representing them, and whoever's in this seat and whatever will represent them. But at the end of the day, it's the group of players that I love the idea of. That group of 250 people are all supporting each other to grow the game and to ensure that their voice is heard, and to get sure they get the best conditions possible. And I love that about it. So I don't want it to come across like it's the Jacob Holmes show. Like,
no, 100%. No,
like about me, but like a PA is the players, right? And I'm just lucky to work for them, and I've worked hard and proud of that. But it's definitely about the players.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't mean for it to come across that way. It's I guess it does take someone to, I guess, create a platform where they can then launch off and make it their own. Same as with what Larry done. And then at the very bottom of the ladder, what I'm trying to do with this podcast is try not for it to be a podcast, but at least to be a platform where players can express really who they are, not just their 3-point percentage or the fickle stuff. I would like to fire some questions actually just to get some clarity around the Players Association. So we'll start off with, does every player in the NBL and WNBL have to be in the association?
Don't have to be. We're very fortunate that 95, 98% of whatever it is, basically everyone is. The sport, but it's not mandatory. But we have a great membership across all our WNBL and NBL players, which is great.
Yeah. And is there a coaches association?
There isn't. It's actually an interesting one. It's been a lot of conversations over a number of years. A number of coaches have come back. I think to be fair, I think they've seen the growth of the Players Association and gone like, hey, we like that'd be. The challenge with coaches are there's not a lot of coaches, unlike the players, and also there's this hierarchy of head coaches. Like we have discussed it with them. I've had meetings with coaches around how they could set it up, and but no, there's one to my knowledge at this stage.
Yeah, it would be because I guess coming from an AFL state over here is once a year I think the CEO of the AFL, the outgoing Gil McLaughlin in this case, has all the coaches over to his house, they bring a bottle of wine and they chat about ideas and that sort of thing for coaches. I think that sort of thing might be something that they could sort of at least get a start on if they're not already, and get those joint conversations going.
Yeah, I think Alice Nicholson, who used to run the Australian Cricket Association, actually runs the AFL Coach Association now. So that's right. That's my nerdy knowledge of players. Yeah. I mean, I need to know that but yeah. So they have a coach association, and I think it would be valuable. I agree with you there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And when a player goes overseas, whether it's a Ben Simmons or Paddy Mills or whatever, are they then still entitled to be part of our Players Association, or are they an NBA Players Association?
Kind of both. So Boomers and Opals are members of ours no matter where they play, and even players that have left the NBL playing in Europe or stuff, they're still members because we provide support, whether it's wellbeing and education support and those player development grants, or whether it's into legal support with reviewing contracts overseas or in NBL 1, or so that continue as a member, you get those benefits whether you play in the NBL or WNBL or not. And the same with Boomers and Opals. So those members are members through playing with the national teams and support us that way. But they also have the NBA and WNBA Player Associations, who we have a good relationship with. Matteo Zaretti, who works over there at the NBA Player Association, really close associate, been excellent, head of international players, very good. And Terry Jackson, who started the WNBA Player Association, is excellent and made really good improvements there. And we've collaborated a long time, even back a number of years ago, around their first pregnancy parental policy, which we actually had before they did. So she shared ideas for that. So it's been a really good collaboration, but the players are, supported over there as well. So yeah, it's a good network, and we have connections through the World Player Association, which has bodies through Europe, through EU athletes, which also gives support to athletes on the ground when they're in Europe if they need it.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Yeah, because I was thinking there might be some grey area there where if you've got a Matisse Seibel or a Ben Simmons and they need, whether it's medical help or some sort of help or whatever, like which sort of organization do they go to? But if there's sort of multiple that they can be involved in, then obviously there's still assistance there for them. In terms of joining the Players Association, what do players do? What's the process? Because I guess the fans really wouldn't know that.
Yeah. So we usually go around, like we did just recently, NBL Blitz, and we go around and we talk to players around. Obviously present on where the league's going, potentially where collective bargaining is, or stand play contracts, new change of conditions, or whatever it might be. Go through that, and then we do the membership, whether it be team by team or in group setting, and go through the benefits and access to services and that. And then, but most of our, we have so many returning players, they're already existing members, just that carry on being members. So that's kind of how it works. And with both leagues, national teams, very similar, the same. We have obviously a collective bargaining agreement with the Basketball Australia for the Boomers and Opals. So that dictates those terms and conditions, which was a really significant one and one of the only ones in basketball, in world basketball, to have a CBA specific for the national team. So that really is a great platform for the players, we think, around, like when you look at the teams and the support they have now. I think that's a really big one. And, a number of players have spoken around the changes back when we played, when you're washing your own uniform, to where it is now. I think that's a really strong testament to those players. I remember having a meeting with them at a hotel on the edge of Albert Park Lake in 2016. I think, like, hey, we're going to do this. Like, yeah, what needs to change? Like, we need to stop, washing our uniforms in the sink. We need to stop, like traveling like this. We need to, and it was just simple things that we've worked on with the players, led that, which has been great.
Yeah. So when it comes to a collective bargaining agreement, can you fill us in sort of on what stakeholders are involved in terms of, I guess, negotiating?
Yeah, usually we'll start with our players. So for our process, we start really with the players. Like, what matters to players. Like, it's all good what I think or what someone else thinks. It's actually, what do the players want to change, and what are the key issues there. And we try and distill that down to a really clear negotiating plan.
So is this like a meeting of delegates from teams, or is it surveys?
They'll meet every club and all the players, and we'll go through that and do surveys around what the key issues are and collate that information across all of our, say, 10 NBL teams or 8 WBL teams, and bring that all together and say, all right, here's what's come out of every club. We'll shape that in terms of the feedback over the previous period of CBA. So 3 years, we'll have 3 years worth of issues that have come up and go, okay, well, here's what's come up. Here's what prioritise these. What's most important? Is it, salary cap and increase? Is it development players increase? Is it more this? Or so, if you look at the NBL, and what came out of our discussions was obviously continue to increase the wages and continue to be proactive on that. That's an obvious one, but increasing the number of development players at each club, only having one, and increasing and mandating 2 at each club. We wanted to increase the number of available opportunities for young Australian, New Zealand players to play and develop in the NBL as a competitive player. So that was a big push from all the players. That even though they're not, obviously none of them are developed players anymore, they were really passionate around it. So that's what you pick up when you do these club by club meetings, and then you'll move into so the next phase of distilling that down with the board and the delegates around what we're going to work through, and then you start the meetings with the governing body or the league, depending on who it is, and you often will start with a fair few people, and then a fair few issues, and you'll start bring them down, and you're getting down to the pointy end of what's really going to take some negotiating, and then you work through that however long it may take, and depending on what the CBO says in terms of whether it ends or whether it continues until you reach a new agreement. And then once you have got to that point, we've got something in principle, then we'll take it back out to our board delegates and players. We'll then vote on it. If it's approved, we can sign off on their behalf.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting take on it. In terms of time frame, that sounds like obviously there's a lot of conversations that need to be had to get to that point. Are we talking months? Are we talking a couple of years?
Yeah, months and months, depending. It can take 12 months. You'd like it not to, but most of you start at least 6 months in advance of when the term date will end, and to try and get in front of it. We'll start before that with our players in terms of consultation, ensure we're ready 6 months out to actually start negotiating. So it's a big process, but this is like the players' livelihoods. There's 2 main reasons why we exist as a player association, I think. One, and there's plenty underneath that, but one is to get the best conditions possible for our players, industrially, commercially, in a collective bargaining standard player contract. And 2 is to support them as players, as people. Like, make sure they're looked after as people, and they know that someone has their back, and there's resources available, and people that care about them more than just as a basketball player. Our player development managers and stuff will say this really well, but we look at our players as people first. So, like, the people that play basketball. So it's an amazing job. It's, as I said, the best job I'll ever have, but it's still what they do it's not who they are. And establishing that as a principle that we support them as players, as people, and then we fight for them as much as we can to get the best conditions they can. Sort of why we exist. So you have to establish that through collective bargaining, how you build that up, and you've got to take your time with it. And we invest a lot of resources into that process is the big things we do. But it is difficult because we have got 4. You've got 4 groups. So you've got a national team CBA, you've got a WBL CBA, and then you've got an NBL CBA. So
right, okay, so yeah,
happen at similar times. It's pretty hectic.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And I get another question I had was A lot of the listeners that will have listened to Lucas Walker's podcast episode, he touched on, I think it was going from memory, like 2010, 2011, something like that, with the Melbourne Tigers and going down there and sort of the owner there hooking him up with the job and saying, look, this is what we want you to do. I don't think it actually eventuated in that case, but he said it was very much at that stage on the individual, or perhaps the owner would encourage them to do some work or something like that. And I remember going back to uni, and I think when I was doing my degree, I had Lee Montagna for St Kilda, and I don't remember who the other St Kilda player was, but they were telling us they had to do 1 unit per semester as a minimum requirement for preparing them for a life, or a career, I should say, not a life, but a career outside of their sport. Is there any, I guess, requirements, or is it just more encouraged, and then you guys will give support for players? Is it mandatory? What's the go around work and something else outside of basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I think none of it's mandated in any sort of professional league in Australia. Like, I mean, some clubs make it, they say we strongly encourage, and they really, so it's kind of becomes, right. But I mean, you can't force someone to do it. But I think it's trying to. We're in a similar space. Like, we provide as many resources we can, and clubs are really proactive about it, and players are good on it. But some players in our space have actually done a degree in college. So it's come back to, so it's less around doing a degree, it's more around like making sure that piece of paper doesn't get a dust on it, and you dust off 10 years later and go, why is this worth anything? So we haven't done anything with a degree for 10 years. It may not be worth what it was 10 years ago. So it could be that. It could be other areas. I think we've really evolved into we call it player wellbeing engagement, but player development areas. Like, it's not just around not everyone wants to go to uni. So, there's a heap of people doing other things off the court, which is important to establish, like, just opening your eyes to, like, there's a bigger world out there, that this sport is everything. It's huge and it's consuming, but there is a whole world out there that probably doesn't really care about that, but is available to you to invest some time into. So just balancing that with the time of people's careers and when they're open to those discussions is a really difficult one. But just as long as you're there, I think, and present, and put things in front of players, and they know that there's a resource there available to support them, whether it be to do a public speaking course, or work on their, to help with their small business setup, or to do a degree, or do a TAFE course, or to do, coaching accreditation, like if you can, just those things are all relevant and employable, skills sets for players to have when they leave the game. So that's great. And really encouraging those, and having some time away from the court to think about those things.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and especially how you framed it earlier, saying we look at them as players. As people who just happen to be players. Like, that's what they do, not who they are. And I hope that's what's coming across on this platform, because I think that gets lost a lot. And I really say this every single episode, and I'm probably driving people crazy with it. But with social media, the players, and now, like tonight with the league starting, and the introduction of a fantasy league, which is a great thing for the fans. But again, it just paints the players more as products or objects that are bought and sold and traded. And now fans not only go to, as same with betting, fans not only go to a game now cheering for their team, but they're cheering for Chris Golding to have 4+ 3-pointers with 5+ assists. And if he doesn't get near that, he's going to get 200 troll comments on his Insta and stuff. So I think this reiteration, and I don't really care if people get sick about it, but this reiteration of that they're actual people and human beings, and they're going to go home and tuck their daughter in bed that night and all that stuff, regardless of whether they won you $20 on your multi or whatever. I think is important for people to understand. So on that, or not on that point, but I guess moving later into a player's career, when a player retires, is it just a sort of cut-off point with the Players Association, or is there something ongoing from that for a certain period of time where there is a system? What's the go there?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been one of those things that we've tried to build out. When I first started, to kind of be frank, we didn't have the resources. It was just, when I started, it was just me running it. From the from the deck in Townsville. So it was not there, and anyone that came up to Adelaide were just building up. But now we have a more sophisticated system around when players transition out, and trying to support them through that process, and having resources available as well as staff available to work through it. But a great kind of way of explaining it was David Stiff, and Peter Gibbs has done this as well. That if you just come to the end of your career and then all of a sudden we rock up as player station, go, hey mate, you've just retired, let's have a chat. They're like, who are you? Like, how do you help me? What? And also it's pretty late to have that discussion by then. So that may happen at times, and that's okay. We'll be there and have those discussions and help where we can. But if we can have that discussion and build that transition plan whilst they're playing the game, that's what we would ideally be. So that's what we're working really hard on doing, is trying to, and we've got to do better at it. Like every player association, I think would admit, you've got to do better at it each year. And that's what we're trying to evolve, is that when they actually leave the game, they're have a bit of a plan. And it may not be with us, it may be themselves, it may be self-motivated. They may require us to kind of lean in more and help with, additional development grants, or with opportunities to link them into sponsors or whatever, like it might be, when they just kind of go, oh, hang on, I've got to work this out now, which sometimes happens, and that's, you kind of get it. But trying to have that discussion as you work your way through your career is the ideal state. But we've also very understanding that, in my role right now, if someone said to me, hey, on the side, can you do some other full-time thing as well, just to get yourself ready for your next career? We're like, where? I'm like, what? So it's not easy to play and be the best 0.1% of basketball players in Australia, and then everyone expects athletes to do this whole big other thing on the side all the time. That's not many people are doing that. Not many people are working in the top 1% of their profession and also doing something on the side. So
something would have to give,
asterisks that like, it's got to be reasonable and rational what they can achieve, and timing is right. And off season might be better, and as they move later in the career might have more space, but then they have families, and you just got to work through that juggle and be respectful that it's not going to be easy when you transition, about how well organised you were. And even myself, it wasn't easy, but it was just probably not as bad, because I had a good idea about what I would do, and I had a good framework around me in terms of that. But it was still difficult, and you still go through those days, you're like, man, like this is not as fun as shooting hoops with my mates and talking rubbish with Russell Hinder in the change room. Like, drafting a collective agreement is not as fun as that, but I get my joy out of it, so it's all right.
Yeah, no, and that makes complete sense. To be honest, but I think it also speaks to the versatility, it sounds like, the Players Association has around problem solving, for lack of a better term, or figuring stuff out. And I think that's what a support network should be, really, is not just a guidebook or a handbook is one thing, but then to actually have conversations and go, well, look, we could do this and we can sort this out. This is what's going on. I think that's the magic in it. Now, I did get some questions from the listeners that want to ask you some things. We've got a question from Tyrone Mumford. Do you get to sit in or contribute when the league negotiates TV rights? I'm not sure if the Players Association sits in on that. No,
we don't sit in those rooms. They get to do that. Obviously, if you look at right now, we synchronise our collective bargaining agreements on the basis of broadcast deals, as do most other professional leagues, around making sure that the CBA comes out and is available and negotiated at a time when the broadcasting deal has been established to so you can make sure it's all relevant, and so that's part of it. So we will always get that information at that point in time, but we don't sit in the room with Larry's and whoever the execs are from different broadcasters.
Yeah, so you essentially just get informed of the outcome, and then you can base your framework around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And I've got one of the other questions is, I think, more about your playing days, from Julio. What was it like playing with Darren Eng? That's a
Darren Eng?
Yes.
Unbelievable. Like, he's a good mate of mine. So, like, I don't asterisk, I'm allowed to take the piss out of him because he's a good mate of mine. But and we played juniors against each other, and I think I actually beat him in a championship game once for the NBL 1. So well done, Darren. And we won one together, I think, too. Anyway, so Darren was an amazing player, one of the great all-time shooters. So in terms of I like basketball, but good shooters I've ever seen play. Daryl Pearce, the Iceman, when I was a junior, unbelievable. I wish I got to see Werner Lin. No one will remember who that is, but he's a famous South Australian basketball player that I never got to see play. Was a doctor who used to smoke, apparently. So that's a classic story. But so Daryl Pearce, Brett Maher is the greatest shooter I've ever seen play the game. And I played with great shooters, but he was unbelievable and would talk so much trash while he was shooting. It was not funny. If you didn't get 9 out of 10 on a rack, like a 3-point rack, if you got 9, he'd be like that. He'd mockingly say, "Man, that is such a good effort. You've tried so hard today." And then go.
Which player is this you're talking about?
Brett Maher.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He'd just be like, he'd just take it out of you and just would just, like, it was nothing better than getting offensive rebound, just dishing back out to Mars and just running down the court. We were doing that before Steph Curry was. We were running down the court like, this thing's in, let's roll. So Darren Ing's in that same bracket. I think he'll be able to tell you the number. It was something like 7-minute one-ball shooting drill was like 100 and something. It was, it missed 4 shots in 7 minutes. It was unbelievable, so efficient shooter. But he better shoot well because the man could not play D. So, but as I said, I'm allowed to take the piss out of him because he's a mate of mine. But no, he was a great player, a smart player. He used to, I loved playing with Darren. He was, he actually was a better defender than I give him credit for. He was an unbelievable shooter. But it was a funny story. I remember one game, he came on late in the game. We're down by 2, and he's come on to, obviously he's come on, hasn't played much, come on to shoot the 3. And I think my father said to me, he goes, "Hey, next time Darren comes on and goes and stands in the corner, tell him to stop practicing shooting 3-point shots because he's really giving away the play." And it was just like, that's fair feedback. Like, you need to be a little bit more covert with your, "I've come on to shoot the game-winning 3." So anyway, he's still involved now. And again, like a doctor, he was doing his medical degree while we were playing, doing exams on game days. Like, that was
it sort of speaks to what you said before about it's very difficult to do something full time and then do something else full time on the side, and that's essentially where his career obviously ended up being cut a bit short by himself, really, in terms of having to go ahead to do that. And I think now he's like a specialist doctor on veins or something like that.
He does a lot of special things. I don't attest about it, know exactly what he does now, but his whole family his brothers and that. So he's
one of the few players I think in retirement that's actually got even skinnier. I saw him at the Australian basketball, the Eltham Daniel tournament at the start of this year, coaching Sturt. And if you turn sideways, you lost him.
He's never a big guy. Like, he used to wear gloves. He used to wear gloves to do weights so he didn't get little calluses on his hands because it was like, come on, mate. Because I've got to look after my hands. Like, spare me. So I hope he doesn't mind me telling that story. But
no, that will be fine. I'm sure that's what teammates are for, so you can rip them the rest of your life. I'm cognizant of your time as I am with everyone that comes on this episode. So we'll sort of wrap it up here. But I guess like you touched on earlier, you've the Players Association is growing into something fantastic. We've learned a hell of a lot about it today. I guess just to give us something to follow, and by the way, for those listening, you can actually follow the AVPA on Instagram and those sort of things. They'll give you updates of things that are going along. You can go on their website and see which players that play for your team, the delegates, because there's quite a few delegates on there. So it's really cool to see who it is on there. But I guess to finish up, what are some challenges coming up that you guys would like to sort of take head on in terms of developing to the next level?
Yeah, like, I think that's a good question. I think we've got a pretty clear strategy where we want to go as a players association with the players. It was touched on a couple of players as people, like evolving that program to be better. I think it can be way better. Have more players with more clarity, more support from us to grow the game and grow the influence of players of the direction of the game and connecting them with the community more. I think the work we've done in community, connecting players and supporting players as they do that. Like, I'll even look at the stuff that we haven't done it, but look at the stuff that Paddy's done with IBA, and they've just got that recent national tournament this weekend for under 17s. Unbelievable stuff.
If anyone wants to follow that, that's the Indigenous Basketball Association. Check that out, guys.
Indigenous Basketball Australia are amazing. Even like players won our community and leadership award this year. Like that, they've done that. In domestic violence with that space. Like, I think you look at the players that have done that doing it. Like, I love that space for us. So that's really exciting. Alex Bunton's doing that, and Amy Clydesdale doing her stuff with mental health and general. So like, I like that from players and doing that. But for us, the challenges will be, how do we keep progressing? I look at the WBL and I think that's a big area. I think got a big opportunity for us. I'm really passionate around supporting the players and trying to grow that league. The NBL's got its next iteration to go, like next expansion and growth to go. And then you look at the Boomers and Opals, like what's bigger than the Olympics? So like that is a massive, massive focus for us, is working with our players around what does next year look like. Coming out of the World Cup with the Boomers just now, and obviously the successful World Cup with the Opals last year, and the Boomers Olympic rose gold. Like, I think that we're building to this crescendo of our national teams on the international stage and going to Paris, and like we want to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunity. So that's the players, and that's supporting them in influencing their environment, influencing what they need, and then really driving that so that working with Basketball Australia and that to be able to make the most of it, because I think it's a huge opportunity. So many people are playing the sport. It's growing. It's definitely booming. So let's not make mistakes that have made in the past, like we spoke about earlier. Let's really go. Let's double down. And I think the players have a huge role in that, because they've got such great profile. They're really smart. They kind of care about the game. They're not trying to take from it. They're trying to give back to it, but they want it to be professional and want it to grow. So that's a challenge, and the opportunity is this next 12 months is a big period of time for the sport, and I'm really excited by it. Really.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And it's so positive, I think, is what's so fantastic about it, is it's positive, it's going in the right direction. And like you said earlier, it's player driven, which means it's very hard to stop. It doesn't revolve on it. If one person pulls out, the thing doesn't fall apart.
It's a gorgeous quote, right? We used recently at World Cup, was like, it's kind of like wrestling, just tag and next one in and tag, and that's what happens with the players. Just next man or woman up. Like, let's go. We're coming in, and I love that idea. That it's just like you're not alone. That's the whole point of player association. It's the collective voice of the players. Just keeps evolving, keeps growing. So it's an exciting time for sport, but also for the players and as their association.
Yeah, no, and I will just also David Stiff was mentioned a few times in this podcast episode. He did a really, and I'm not above spooking someone else's podcast. He did a really good episode on Under the Surface with Annalee Maley, and really spoke about a lot of the things that you've spoken about today, but probably more so in his sort of portfolio of psychology and those sort of things. So if people are interested in that, check out that episode of David Stiff with Annalee Maley on Under the Surface. It was about 90 minutes of really delving into what it's like being a player, and I guess the support for players and just ways to think about things. And you can, even when you listen to that episode, I think for anyone listening out here, it wasn't just about the players. It was about like the human side of the players. So you could even, a lot of the stuff David says, you could actually apply to your own life, not just regardless of whether you're a player or you're a gardener or you're a plumber or you're an accountant. It was really interesting around mindset stuff. So check that out. I'll let you go today, Jacob. Thanks for coming on. It's been fantastic. Everything I could have hoped for and more in terms of educating and getting some clarity and answers around how these sort of announcements we hear about actually go on behind the scenes and how they're created. And also the other names that you mentioned about, people that are helping you out, because it's one thing to have a vision, but when something as big as this gets rolling, it would not be possible to do it by yourself.
No,
very good. Thanks.
I appreciate it, man. I did want to mention, like, as Rusty did, and I think Waxy did as well, and even Mars, like what you're doing, I really appreciate. I love the idea of it. It fits right within what we're talking about as a player association. Yeah, you care about all the other things, but the players, people, and understanding their stories. So we love it, mate. It's really, and sorry it's taken so long to get on, but I'm glad we did it. And thanks for sticking with me.
That's okay, mate. The best things in life take time.
Well, I'm not one of those, so you completely oversold it. But anyway, I'll take it.
No, that's good. I really appreciate it. And like I say to most of the people we chat to, it'd be good to sort of catch up again in a couple of years and see where everything's sort of taken us. And how it's been growing. Because if you'd said that 2 years ago, like I mentioned, sort of the 6 years earlier, things have gone ahead in leaps and bounds. So who knows what the future holds, but it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is definitely. No, sounds good. Lock it in, mate.
All right, mate. Thanks very much, and we'll chat to you again at some point.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. We look forward to joining you in the next episode.